Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the MYE's monthly crash course regarding studying for the SAT. MYE stands for Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation. And it is an organization that does many community service events in order to help the people in our community. This event is hosted by the Youth Leadership Committee that is a part of the organization. My name is Hannah Wang, and I am the co-president of the Youth Leadership Committee. I'm very excited to be a part of this seminar as we have an amazing speaker with us discussing a very important topic, the SAT. Most people have taken the school SAT, and some may feel the need to attempt one more time over the summer, and some people might have not taken it yet. This month's seminar provides tips on how to score better on the SAT.
Hi, my name is Michelle Zhang, and I am the Vice President of MYE Youth Leadership Committee. For today's keynote speaker, we have Siddh Sheth, who received a 1600 score on the SAT. During the seminar, you are welcome to post any questions you may have in this comment section, and we will come back to answer them during the Q&A session at the end. Now, please welcome Siddh Sheth.
Hello, is everyone able to hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to work with you guys on this SAT seminar and give you some general tips to succeed. Just some really quick stuff about me. I'm a junior and I did score a 1600 on my SAT as well as a 1520 on my PSAT. I'm the president of my school's Math and English National Honor Society as well as my Model UN. As well, I also participate in my school's marching band. And I'm really excited to help you guys out. So just going over what we'll cover, we're going to start with understanding the digital format. Then we'll go into some general preparation tips, then some tips specifically for the reading and writing section, then tips specifically for the math section, some tips for the day of the SAT, and then lastly, some resources, and then we'll do the Q&A. Okay, so the first thing we're going to cover here is understanding the new format. So recently, College Board switched over to a digital format last spring, and most of you guys may be aware of this, but now the key differences are for both the reading and the math, there are now two modules. And so how these modules work is everyone's given a standardized first module for both sections, and then depending on how you score in those first two modules, you'll go to either a harder and easier second module. If you go to the harder reading and writing or math module, you'll get harder questions as it implies, but you'll also be able to score a higher score all the way up to a 1600. Whereas if you score lower on either section, then your total score could only max around 1300. In addition, we also have the essay section, which remains optional on both versions of the test. However, I won't be covering any tips for that specifically today. Another key difference to note is all math has a calculator, and Desmos is available for all math questions, so you're no longer required to bring in your own calculator unless you wish. And then lastly, all reading stimuli are shorter and per question. So what this means is when you're in that reading module, each question will give you a stimuli, and what that means is it's typically a passage or a graph, and then you're expected to analyze it or answer a question about it, but it's only one question per these shorter stimuli. And so how it used to be before is you get this really long passage and have to answer 7 to 10 questions about it. Now it's just a short passage with one question, and that's how it goes for the whole reading and writing section. And now just going into some general preparation tips. So first question is, when should I start preparing? So I know we have a wide variety of ages in the audience, but generally, I recommend that you complete Algebra 2 before you start working for the SAT, as that's the highest math it'll cover. I recommend preparing during the summer of your sophomore year and then taking the August SAT, because any sooner and you might not have completed Algebra 2, and any later, you're going to want to start working on your college apps, and junior year is obviously very busy. If you have not taken Algebra 2 by then, that is okay, but you will need to learn some of the content yourself, because Algebra 2 does make up a significant portion of the exam. And if you do take Algebra 2 earlier than the end of your sophomore year, or complete Algebra 2 before the end of your sophomore year, you could start studying for the SAT, but keep in mind your English levels may not be where it needs to be to start working for the SAT. So you do have that variability for when you do take Algebra 2, and it really is up to you when you want to start. But I would take note of those caveats. And so looking at practice and prepare, these are some of the strategies that I used when I'm studying for my test. First thing I recommend you do is take a practice test and analyze your results. You can't really start preparing until you know where you actually are. So for each question that you answer incorrectly, determine whether you didn't know it, didn't know how to approach it, or you just ran out of time. And so I'll give you strategies for each one depending on how you did on that question. First, if it's a content deficit or you just didn't know the information that's in the question, you need to review the topic heavily on Khan Academy. And Khan Academy is a really important resource that I will discuss further, but it offers practice questions and divides up all the questions in the way College Board does it. So it's a very useful tool, and I highly recommend you guys check it out. If you don't know how to approach the question, redo it without looking at the correct answer. And if you still can't get the correct answer then I would look at the answer explanation that College Board provides and write how you would approach a question of a similar style later. Very often, I see a lot of my friends and other people I've worked with on that SAT look at a question they get wrong and say, oh, that was obvious. I should have known that. I'll get it next time. But when you're writing it down, it actually helps you recall that. And it's a form of active recall, which will help you actually cement it more concretely in your mind so you have it for future use, which is what you want so you can get your goal score. Next, for the question, if you ran out of time, look at the time spent per question. So when you take a full Blue Book practice test, by the way, Blue Book is the app that you take the SAT on if you didn't know, and you should have that on your device, and they're the ones offering these practice tests that I'm referring to. Look at how long you spent on some of the longer questions and see if you're able to cut down some time. And wherever you're able to cut down time is crucial because on the actual SAT, you want to be able to have enough time to answer every question so you're able to achieve your target score. Then I would look at the question that you ran out of time on and see if you were able to actually answer the question if you had actually gotten to it or you had enough time to answer it. And if you weren't, then I'd go back to the previous strategies that I discussed earlier. One, do you not know how to approach it? Or two, did you not know the content behind it? And then follow suit with similar strategies. This is really important because even though you ran out of time, that very well could have been a question that you could have gotten wrong or that's important for you to cover. So make sure you're looking at all the questions, even if you're running out of time on them. Next, I would rinse and repeat with a practice test every week. This is a lot more easily done in the summertime because usually you don't have as much with school going on. So I highly recommend doing this during the summer. You can totally do this during the school year too, but sometimes it gets difficult to balance all those AP classes or whatever else you may do in school sports, school clubs, with taking a practice test and analyzing the results as rigorously as you will be doing with this method. So staying motivated, this is a really important part of it because obviously you can have a plan for how you want to achieve your goal score, but being able to follow through is the most important part. And I noticed a lot of my friends and other people I've worked with on the SAT getting a little like demotivated near the especially in the beginning time because it's kind of hard to like get going into it. So here are some tips I recommend for that. First, set simple daily goals that are feasible for you to complete, whether that be analyze questions 1 to 20 on the math section or do X amount of practice problems. Whatever it is, make sure you're keeping daily goals so you're knowing how much progress you're actually making because it's one thing to set the goal of completing a practice test every week. But if you're analyzing all your results in one day and kind of rushing through all of it, that's not an appropriate use of your time. So making sure you have adequate daily goals and spreading your efforts across those days are really key. Next, I recommend having a person who's your motivator. This could be a really motivated friend that you have, or one of your parents or your siblings. Generally, these people are there to make sure you're staying on top of things and just checking in daily, saying, "Oh, have you gotten this done? Are you doing this?" I'll make sure to you get done with your SAT work for the day. And this is good because they're kind of like your vigilators. If you are your own invigilator, sometimes you can let some things go and you can be like, oh, I'll just save it for tomorrow. With an other person dictating what you should do, it's really helpful because then they're being more strict with you often than you are being with yourself. Next, stay positive. Don't get demotivated by small mistakes. Even if you don't score really as well as you want on your first full practice SET, still stay confident and keep going. Your score will improve if you are consistently practicing and working. You just have to give it some time, and change can't happen automatically. And then last tip, think of your end goal and be how happy you will be. Think of how happy you will be if you succeed. Obviously, the process can be really difficult and time consuming. But if you just envision that end goal and think about how much time and stress you're saving yourself by doing it now instead of saving it for later, that's just really the most important part. Just staying confident and staying motivated with yourself. And obviously, these are just some small tips. Every person's very different with their motivation, but these are just general tips that you could use that I've seen work for other people and myself. So now I'm going to go into more specific tips for the reading and writing section specifically. So first type of question we have here is words in context. So a words in context question is one where they give you a full passage or a couple sentences and they leave one word blank in in that passage. And you're asked to select the word that best fits in that gap. So my tips I have for this type of question are read the sentence very carefully. Oftentimes a sentence will rephrase the answer during the next part. So oftentimes it will be like, it'll give you the blank and then it'll just rephrase or give a synonym for the word that you are trying to look for. And this can be really helpful. And also, I mean, read carefully too, because oftentimes there can be a negating word like not or never, and this can oftentimes significantly change your answer. So College Board likes to put antonyms of each other. So one having a more like positive connotation or a yes, and then one being more negative and a no, having like that no connotation. And really, you want to look for the one that aligns with the passage most. So make sure you're reading very carefully for those words. If you are in between a word you do not know and a word you do know, pick, as long as you're reasonably confident with the word you do know, the word you know. So I've noticed a lot of times with other kids I'm working with on the SAT that they can pick words that they don't know because they're like, oh, it's a fancy word. It probably is the right answer. I just don't know it. Really avoid doing this. If you're very confident on an answer you have for a word you do know, and you don't know another word, just stay confident with your answer and stay true with that, because the last thing you want is to lose a couple points just because you picked a word you didn't know because you thought it would be right. Just stay confident with the answer you do know. If, however, it's a word you don't know and the rest of the answers don't really make sense and you do know them, obviously go with the word that you don't know because it's likely the one to best fit in the category because you know the other ones clearly don't fit. And lastly, if you don't know the word, look at the word parts and do process of elimination. This can be really helpful because oftentimes the College Board likes to put in longer words that you may not necessarily know the answer to, but look for prefixes like on or d or in, and those can indicate no or a negation or like a negative connotation. So just picking up on small clues like that can really help you. And then we have process of elimination, which I can really highlight with this next question here. So I'll give everyone like a couple minutes, look at this question, and think of in your head what you would answer to this question. Okay, so hopefully that was enough time. And when we're looking at this text, we can see that these authors are more autonomous, or they're having their um, oh, sorry. The Johnson has a more autonomous stance, and whereas Webb Dubois and Alan Delocq, they're putting a contrast to that. And so when we're looking at these options here, I chose this one because it highlights both of the strategies that we looked at earlier. So one being that word part. So when we're looking at option D, you might not know what unpretentious is, or you've never seen it in that context before, or that word before, but you most likely do know what pretentious is. And that means like, oh, like very snobby or high and mighty, basically. And when you see the un in front of it, that kind of negates it. And so you can see that option doesn't really fit in with the answers. And then when we're going to process of elimination, we can see A, proficient. That means you're adequately doing something. That's probably that's not gonna fit there. And ambiguous is something that's unclear, and that's again not gonna fit there. So then we're gonna look at answer option B, which you may not know, but since you know that all the other answers don't really work there, you can pick B pretty confidently. And so B is going to be the right answer there. Next, we're going to go into some textual understanding questions. These are the questions that give you either one or two passages and then ask you to analyze them or pick out a quote or pick out a claim that is supported throughout the passage. So the first tip I have here is a lot of these textual understanding questions can be very scientific or be research studies. And so with these confusing scientific terms, so maybe they're putting some sort of species on there with their scientific name, or they're talking about some fancy term that they define at the beginning of the text. Take note of that, whether that be on a scrap sheet of paper or be on the annotate tool that Blue Book gives you. And just make note of those because they can help you stay organized with those different scientific terms. Because I know when they define a term very early in the passage and then you get to the end of it and they're like mentioning all these terms again, it can get kind of confusing. So just having that constant list to act as your dictionary can be really useful. Next big tip here, don't zone out. I know this is really difficult, especially with the really boring text that the SAT gives you, but it's really crucial that you're staying in the moment and making as much use of time, making as best use of time that you can with these questions, because oftentimes the textual understanding questions can take the most time. However, if you're using time efficiently and not zoning out, you can definitely save a couple minutes there, and those couple minutes could make or break your goal score. And then for the two source texts, so I mentioned it earlier, some of these questions can give you two texts and they'll ask you to compare them or contrast them or do something with the text. Be careful for the options. If they're asking you to identify a similarity, be careful for options that only apply to one source. So what I mean by that is sometimes the author likes, or the College Board likes to trip you up by giving you an option that only really relates to one source when it's really asking for information about both sources. So make sure when you're answering these questions, make sure these answers actually relate back to the original passage or both the passages. And if they do not, make sure when you're picking that answer, is that what the question's asking for? If it's asking for a similarity, then it's likely not the right answer if it's only relating to one passage. But if it's asking for a difference, maybe that is the right answer. So it's all really about the context of the question, but just make sure you're picking an option that actually relates to the question and relates to the aspects that are present in both texts if it's asking for similarity. And again, I'll give you a little more time on this one since this one's a textual understanding question and they can take longer. But think in your head, what would be your answer to this question?
Just a reminder that you can put in the chat if you have the answer to the question to participate a little.
Okay, so hopefully you could get through that question. Unfortunately, I can't see the chat, so because I'm on the slideshow screen, but hopefully you guys did answer this correctly in the chat. It was answer C, and so I'll just go through really quickly what the answer, why the answer is C and not the other options. So when we're looking at A here, it discusses earlier productions. However, it says it premieres in New York City, so that means A is the wrong answer. B discusses how audience members find the experience of the play disappointing because they cannot make it through the entire venue, but there's nothing about how the audience can find it disappointing. And then looking at D here, audience members who navigate the space according to its recommended itinerary. So when we look back at this option, at this text, we don't see a recommended itinerary. Again, it's talking about how they travel at their own pace and go through it kind of in their own way. So there's no recommended itinerary that they're discussing there. So the correct option here would be C. And when we're just looking at that option, we can see it relates because it's talking about how its dependence on the particular performance environment would make it difficult to reproduce in a different theatrical space. And this is true because they kind of transformed a 5-story warehouse here. So this is not a typical auditorium where you'd watch such a play. Next, we're looking at the grammar and transition questions. So these questions can often be very difficult for individuals because they don't necessarily know the rules behind these questions. However, what I highly, highly, highly recommend is learn this from Khan Academy. Kind of do as many questions as you can with this until you know the concept really well. These are really easy points if you know what you are doing. I have a lot of friends who, before they learned all these grammar concepts, were like 100 points below where they were until they started learning about these grammar concepts, and their score went up dramatically because these grammar questions are, one, such a significant part of the reading and writing section, but also two, they can be really easy once you know the rules because it's just a rule set. It's not like open to interpretation like these textual understanding questions are, or those words in context questions where maybe there's like, oh, maybe it could be this, maybe it could be that. No, these ones are dead on because it's a specific rule set. So I'll just give you some general tips here, but again, I can't cover all the grammar, but I highly recommend if you don't know this content yourself, go through and study it. It's so important. So my first tip here is options that have periods and semicolons at the same point in the sentence can be eliminated. So this is probably a tip you've heard before, but a lot of times they don't discuss the caveat. So the exception here is if it's used in a complex list. So this is a list with commas in the items. So sometimes it'll give you a complex list where it's like, oh, blah, 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 book, comma, then the description of the book. Then it'll do a semicolon instead of a comma there because since there's a comma in the item already, it can get kind of confusing. So if you see multiple semicolons in a list, you'll know that's a complex list. And in that case, you can't eliminate both options. A semicolon option has to be correct there. And then last thing, look for a flow of ideas with transitions. Do the ideas between that you're transitioning between contrast, give examples for, agree with one another. A lot of the times the transition questions are just asking how these ideas relate. So the second sentence could be giving an example for the first sentence. So the appropriate transition there would be for example. Or the ideas could be contrasting. So they could be using transitions like however. You just need to understand the relationship between those ideas. and then again how those transitions relate. So they can be agreeing, negating, giving examples. Another good one is time transitions. So like first, next, then, finally, all important questions or transitions. Okay, so take a couple minutes for this one as well, and you can put it in the chat as well. Okay, hopefully that was enough time to answer the question. So when we're looking at this, this employs one of the tips I was discussing earlier. So this is not a complex list. We don't see a list going on here anywhere. So that means we can eliminate B and C because they have a period and a semicolon in the same place. And then when we're looking at the other options, the correct answer is D, because A has a comma separating two complete thoughts or independent clauses, if you're familiar with that grammar term. And that is not allowed. It needs to be a comma with a fanboys conjunction, which is for and but, so on and so forth. So, sorry, for and nor, but, or, yet so. And, or it could be a period or a semicolon. So obviously you can't do it with just a comma. And if this all sounds confusing to you, I would go study this on Khan Academy, because this is going to be a key thing that you're going to see a lot of times on the grammar section. And then since all the other options don't work, D works here. Okay, for the note questions here. So these are the ones where you get a bulleted list of ideas and it'll ask you to make a claim or do something with those ideas. And so 90% of the time, you do not actually need to read the notes. You just need to read the option and select the best one, because a lot of the time, some of the options won't actually answer the question and only one will. That being said, please do go back and check in the notes that your answer is correct, because sometimes they like to put two options that do answer the question, but one of them has incorrect information and one has correct information. So please go back and verify. But most of the time, do not start with the notes. Just go into the question, see if you can answer it. And my second tip for this question is make sure you are actually answering the question. In the questions, they'll ask you to make a claim, provide reasoning, use textual evidence, respond to blah, blah, blah. Use the information that the question is giving you and actually answer the question. A lot of the times I will see people answering a question that asks them to use textual evidence, but they don't have an answer with quotation marks in it. So again, it's just really crucial that we read that part of that question and make sure it's actually being answered. So now I'll give you a couple minutes to look at this question. Okay, hopefully that was enough time to answer this question. And the correct answer here will be B. And just going through these options, this is one where you actually really didn't need to read the notes, because when we're looking at these options here, A contrasts how blue backgrounds are used for highway signs, whereas green backgrounds are used on highway signs. So that's not really contrasting how green backgrounds solely are being used differently in the US versus UK, so you can eliminate that. C is addressing a similarity between how the US and UK use green road signs, so that's not a contrast. And then D here, a D here has how both the UK and the US use directional signs, and that doesn't have anything to do with the green signs. So B is the only reasonable option here, and you can see how they contrast the US green signs and the UK green signs. Next, here's some tips for order of answering questions. So some of you may have heard there's a recommended order for how you should answer these, or you should answer them out of order. I personally recommend you find what works best for you through these practice tests. So on your first one, I'd say go through, answer it in order. Then on your next one, go and start with the textual understanding ones. Then on your next one, start with the grammar ones. Go through and find what works best for you. For me, I did words in context. So those are the questions typically you'll find at the beginning. Grammar, and then go through all the way to the end. So you'll find grammar, and then after grammar, you'll find transitions. Then after transitions, you'll find notes. So I just went words in context, grammar, all the way to the end, and then the textual understanding questions, because those took me the longest. And for grammar, how I skipped there is usually grammar questions start from anywhere from question 13 to 18. So I just kind of skipped through until I found the question with the first question about grammar. Generally, from most people I've heard, it is recommended to do grammar before textual understanding, because grammar is just such a quick thing you can do when you know it really well. It's just kind of, you know the rules, so you kind of just go through it really quick. And whereas textual understanding, you need more time to think and interpret the text. So that is the general recommendation. But again, find what works best for you. It's not a one size fits all kind of situation. You just need to find what works best for you. Next, we're going to go into some math tips here. So first thing here, we have Desmos. So I highly recommend you use Desmos. And I know a lot of people online can say, oh, if you prefer your graphing calculator, use your graphing calculator over Desmos. I actually disagree with this advice, because Desmos offers so many tools that your typical graphing calculator can't. It's also a lot quicker at doing things, and your graphs will appear a lot quicker, and you can see them a lot more clearly, because one, they're enlarged, and two, they're in color, which can help a lot. And here's some tips for Desmos, but I highly recommend here you actually go through after the seminar, or whenever you get the chance, watch a quick 20-minute YouTube video on all the Desmos tricks you need for the SAT, because I could have this whole seminar just be on Desmos, but because it's just such a useful tool. But a really key thing I've heard that is really important to get a high math score is being really strong with Desmos. When we first transitioned over to the digital format, I remember the math section went super easily for me, because I had used Desmos previously, and I had a lot of my friends struggling because they were using their typical graphing calculators, and that just takes up so much more time. So knowing Desmos gives you a huge advantage. So here's some general tips, but again, I can't cover it all. First, type mean parentheses whatever data set they give you, or median parentheses whatever data set they give you, and that will calculate the mean or the median, which can answer a lot of first segment questions, because they'll ask for some statistics, and it can take you a lot of time to individually type out all the numbers and then average them. So just doing it through Desmos is a lot easier. And a lot of the systems of equation questions that you'll find typically on the first module too can be answered immediately through Desmos, because you can type in a systems of equations, and just find where they intersect, and that will just be the solution to your equation, which can be really helpful. So one tool on Desmos that I actually do want to go into, because I find it's rarely covered, is linear regressions. So what a linear regression is Desmos can tell you the equation of a function through a process of linear regression with only the points that you have. And so I have here listed all the steps, but actually I'm going to go into Desmos really quick and show you how to do this in real time. So we'll go into the graphing calculator. So first thing here, you're going to do hit add item, and then you're going to want to hit table. And you'll get this table here and just enter in whatever data points. Just to keep it simple here, I'll do 1, 1, and 2, 2. Next, here what you're going to want to do is type in the base form of the equation that you're trying to get. So what I mean by that is that they say it's a linear equation. That's going to be your typical y equals mx plus b, right? So that's going to be y1, because it's not just y, because we see y1 is what's in the table. This correlates, you want to use the tilde instead of the equals, because you're trying to find that correlation. You don't know it yet. You're just trying to find that correlation. mx plus b, or mx1, sorry. See there, I made a mistake. x1, you need x1 because that's what's in the table, plus b. And then here you will get actually what that m and b value are is going to be. So here we find m is 1 and b is 0. So that means y equals x for this equation. And you can see it's the same line here. And this is just a really nifty tool, because here it may look simple, but you get more complex data points, and finding just a simple linear regression through this is a lot easier than trying to figure it all out on yourself if it's just a lot more complicated than that. And then one other important thing to know is, say you were trying to find y equals ax1 squared, a quadratic this time actually, bx1 plus c. You are going to need to add in a third data point, because otherwise it's going to give you a linear line instead of what you're actually looking for. So again, I'll change this to be actually quadratic, and that third data point will make it as accurate as possible. So it isn't necessarily apparent through there, but again, you're going to be wanting to add that extra data point because it will give you a more accurate answer. Because when you get into more decimal points or the numbers are just more complex, Desmos can get it a little wrong if you don't have that additional data point. And I'll just go back to my slides here. And here again is the strategy, except screenshotted. Approaching hard questions. So this is a struggle I see from a lot of people that I work with on the SAT. They just don't know how to start with some of these harder math questions. So first thing I say is, do not panic when you're taking the actual SAT. The nerves won't do you any good. You just want to stay focused and stay in the moment. And a lot of the time, College Board is intentionally trying to trip you up with the way these questions are worded or how they look, just to intimidate you. But you are actually able to solve these if you are able to stay calm and just start. Oh, okay, sorry. So what I was just saying was, you just want to start small. So you want to maybe write equations from the information provided, or break down larger diagrams into smaller shapes, or look for keywords that you actually may know. This will actually help you break down the question and find out steps that you can actually take to solve the question. So, and then one other thing I recommend for these harder questions, or just geometry questions in general, remember the formula sheet has key formulas and conversions you can use in case you forget them. Obviously, it is better to know them off the top of your head because it just saves you a lot of time. But in case you were worried or on them in the moment, just forget them, check the formula sheet first. They likely do have it available for you, and that can be really helpful. But really, it's just staying calm with these questions and just keep moving on, because that's what will get you your goal score. And again, if you're spending too much time on a set question, flag it and then come back to it later, because you want to address the easier questions first, because they will take less time. Oh, and sorry for the math questions. Also, people have asked me, is there a specific order on how to answer these questions? And for me, I would just say no, because the math questions don't really come in a specific order like those reading questions do, or in a specific format. So while there is a pattern or a correlation to how College Board organizes them, it's not really that apparent So I would just, for my pacing for these, just flag questions that are taking you too long and just come back to them at the end. Next, we have some day of tips here. First, get a good night's sleep. I know you've probably heard this so much, but it will really improve your cognitive ability on the day of if you're not really groggy or just falling asleep at your laptop or iPad or whatever you're taking the test on. Next, get to your testing site early. You don't know about the parking situation. You don't know about the traffic situation. Worst case scenario, you're there, 10, 15 minutes early. What I'd rather not happen for you is you come in 5 minutes late and then just miss the entire test because you forgot to pack something or traffic is really bad. So just go there early. It just saves you a lot of stress. You don't want to be that one kid delaying everyone else's testing because you slept in or something. Next, pack your bag early. So I recommend doing this the night or 2 nights before. And here's some just general items that you can include. So your ID, testing ticket, snack, water, your testing device, charger, and calculator if you do not want to use Desmos only. And so those are just the items College Board recommends, but obviously you are able to bring other items. But one thing to note is you can bring a testing watch, so not an Apple Watch, but like just a plain, not digital, or plain, not smartwatch, but you won't necessarily need it because Blue Book actually times you. So that is one thing of the past that you likely not need. Next, breathe and eat a good breakfast. Just feel energized for the day. And the SAT will just be over in 3 hours, but life will go on after that. So the nerves aren't going to do you any good in that moment. So just breathe, eat a good breakfast, and treat it like a normal day. Obviously, it is high stakes, but the last thing you want to do is overstress yourself. Next, have a good attitude. It just makes all the difference. If you're going in with the mindset of, I can achieve my goal score, you're more likely able to do it than, oh, I'm just going to flunk this and then retake it another time. You want to stay positive and hope for the best because that's what's going to actually get you the best. Some more day of tips. Some people have suggested doing practice questions before the test. And for me, I suggest this. I've done this before too, but just not too many. 4 or 5 or a couple per section are good. You don't want to take a full practice test on your way there. Just small questions just to wake yourself up and get yourself in the right mindset. However, if it doesn't work for you or if it just stresses you out, no need to do it. It's just there to help you and wake you up if you need it. Next, for your environment driving to the test, it should be what makes you comfortable before the exam. So if you find yourself getting worked up driving to the test by yourself, then have your friends or family drive you. If you think sleeping before the test helps you, I personally don't recommend it, but if you find it helps you, then do it. The only reason I don't recommend it is because it can make you a little groggy, and that's the last thing you want before your test. But it's really up to you. When I actually took it and I got my 1600, I actually went with my friends and we all carpooled to the test. And on the way there, we watched the B movie, which was just really funny. But it just kind of helped me relax because I can tend to overstress myself, and that's not going to do you any good on the day off. So just find an environment that's comfortable for you. Friends can make it comfortable, family can make it comfortable. Sometimes you just need it by yourself where you're just listening to music and driving there. That's perfectly great too. Just find what works best for you. And then after the exam, just relax. You earned it. And scores come out typically 13 days after your exam. And a lot of people say they come out 8 a.m. in the morning. I wouldn't I wouldn't bet on it. So if they're not showing up immediately, don't panic. Wait a couple hours and they'll come out. And usually College Board staggers them based on your location. So again, maybe it's 8 a.m. for wherever the College Board headquarters is located, but not necessarily for us. Lastly, for resources here, Blue Book practice tests. This is what I've been talking about the entire time when I say practice tests. So Blue Book, again, is that app that you're going to be using on testing day. Highly recommend using these practice tests because they give you the full testing experience. They're made by the College Board, so they actually give you the College Board testing experience. So highly, highly recommend these. Next, the College Board Educator Question Bank. Even though it says it's for educators, you can just search it up and find a bunch of practice tests on there or practice questions on there. And so you can actually filter through, if you're really struggling with words and context, filter through, find a words and context question. And College Board will have hundreds for you to solve. So again, these are just great because they give you the full explanations. They give you just more practice to do. So all the examples I actually pulled throughout the slideshow are from that question bank. So I highly recommend using it. Next, Khan Academy partners with College Board to give tons of practice for the SAT. So using their resources is really helpful. Most of you guys are probably familiar with them when you're studying for your AP classes or doing whatnot. And lastly, Schoolhouse.World is a new program that College Board created. And what they do is basically contact high scoring students on the SAT, and they have them host tutoring sessions, partnering with the College Board. And so I actually tutored through this program, but it gives you a platform where you can work, maybe get a tutor, and it's completely free too. So, and it's also working with the College Board, so they align with the standards. But obviously, there are other practice books from other companies that you could get, or you can sign up for independent tutoring courses, just whatever works best for you again. And that is actually all I have. So if you have any questions, again, you can leave them in the chat, and my email, you can take note of it there. And honestly, if you want to email me any questions that you think of after the seminar, feel free. I help students out all the time with the SAT, and I'm more than willing to answer any of your questions. And again, I hope you find this really helpful as you're studying for the SAT. But yeah, make sure to enter your questions in the chat.
Thank you, Sid, for the insightful presentation. And as he has said, we will have a quick Q&A section with our speaker. And again, if you have any questions regarding the SAT, this is a great opportunity to get an answer. And yeah, just type them in the chat, and we will read out the answer. We will read it out. So, there is one question, is how long do you suggest waiting to take a second SAT test if you're not happy with the first result?
Yeah, okay. So this is tough to say because it really depends on the time that you think you have to prepare for that next SAT. Because going in and taking one SAT and then just immediately going into the next one, like a couple weeks later when you're not really preparing or improving from your previous result, won't really help you. So I recommend doing what you think will get you give you enough time to practice. So typically I see students taking tests in 2-month gaps. So they'll take the August one and then take a month break in that September time to just study for the next one and then do October. And so this is what I typically recommend because during the school year, especially, you'll get really busy and you'll have your classes and your homework going on. So taking that 1-month period gives you enough time to actually go through, study a lot more than what you could for August, for your previous one. And it just gives you a lot more wiggle room because, again, school can be stressful.
Okay, thank you. And another question is that, so we know that a lot of people switch from SAT to ACT. So for you personally, did you take the ACT? And if so, do you think the ACT is harder or easier?
So I actually did not take the ACT. I am going to take the ACT this summer, and I have been studying for that. And basically, honestly, I do think they're pretty aligned, but they align to a specific type of student. So the SAT can align to a specific type of student that's more, how do I say it? More like who can answer these questions, but also can think behind more deeper meaning and passages for the reading questions, especially. The biggest difference I've noticed is actually those reading questions because on the ACT, they're a lot more on the nose, but they'll expect you to answer them a lot quicker. So if you prefer less of a time constricted scenario, but where you actually have to think a lot more deeply about the questions, then I look at the SAT. Or if you do prefer more on the nose questions you can answer fast, then I would recommend the ACT. However, again, I would recommend taking a practice test for both, or if you're finding that your scores aren't coming out good for one of them, maybe trying out the other and seeing what you prefer. So again, a lot of the things I'll say here, it is up to individual preference because everyone's going to be different. But again, just making your options open, that's really what's going to help you the most when deciding what tests to do.
Next question is there an essay anymore, or is there a penalty for superscore? Do colleges see it that way, like as superscore is not a good thing?
Yeah, so for the essay portion does exist, but it's really only in the school day SAT. I have not personally seen it in any other SAT I've ever taken or any other SAT my friends have taken. The essay section, it does exist. I didn't really cover it, but it normally asks you to write a rhetorical analysis, which is basically analyzing the author's techniques that they're using. So like the similes, the metaphors, the different rhetorical devices is what they're called in the text. So, however, the College Board doesn't really put as much emphasis on it, and colleges also don't really look at it much anymore. There are only a couple colleges that do actually look at it for consideration. So, if you do want to utilize that score, you're going to need to do it on that school day SAT most likely, and but honestly, I don't really recommend prioritizing it in your studying. It's not really going to get you anywhere. I more highly recommend if you're trying to get more of an essay credit or a writing credit and your colleges take the essay on the SAT section. I would instead maybe look into an AP language, AP English class because they'll develop your writing skills a lot more and reading skills as well. So if you're looking for that kind of writing credit that colleges will offer with essay, which again is very few anyway, I'd highly recommend those classes instead. But in terms of super score, that again depends on the college. I know U of M will take super scores, and whether they look upon it poorly, I wouldn't necessarily say they look upon it poorly because um, you are self-reporting that score. So again, they're not necessarily like, oh, this student is pulling from this score and this score, and they took this many tests. They're not really seeing that. They're just seeing you pick two scores and putting them together. And if they are accepting it, most likely they're not looking too negatively upon it. But again, when you are submitting a super scored score, a lot of the times the colleges will ask for score reports from both tests. So they will know it is a super scored score. But again, it's really dependent on the college. But I know a lot of U of M students who have actually gotten in with super scores. So I wouldn't say it like completely kills your chance of admission or anything for those colleges.
Oh, okay, thank you. And I have another question is that um I know you said you did the blue book like mock tests. Do you think they're the same level like in difficulty as the actual SAT, or is it like easier or harder?
Yeah, so actually, Blue Book actually released a new set of practice tests from when I actually took it. So when I took it, they had 6 practice tests, and it was infamous that the first 4 were like way too easy, and people's scores like were way too high in comparison. Whereas 5 and 6 were like the only good ones, and you could only really use them. Now, since the Blue Book has revamped those tests, that is no longer an issue. Most of them are pretty on the nose for what the score you're going to get. So since Blue Book is actively revamping them pretty consistently, it's not going to be too far off from the result that you're going to get on that SAT. So in short, I don't really think it's that much difficult or that much easier, but I do still highly recommend. I still do highly recommend using them because of that.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because also, like for me, I did the sixth one too, and just like you said, like the first two was really easy, and then it was harder, 5 for 5 or 6, yeah.
Perfect. There's another question regarding the vocab. This person mentioned that some people have memorized vocab terms or prefixes, and if so, did that help? Or is there like any SAT vocabulary prep advice? They'd mentioned that Kabir's prep has some vocab to memorize. Was that any help?
Yeah. So in terms of vocab, um, that again really does come down to the individual. And I hate that I keep saying it again, but it is really on an individual basis. So what I've noticed is a lot of my friends who are more like readers and are into reading or reading really honestly on the daily, they have no trouble with that words and context section and they just know all that vocab. However, I know other people who aren't necessarily as big of readers and they don't necessarily know as much vocab. They need those Quizlets or that a vocab bank that you that you're discussing, or some other like prefix memorization tools. So again, it does come down to the individual, but there are a lot of resources for common questions that College Board likes to use because there have been trends in the types of questions or types of words that College Board will use. For example, the word sublime has been coming up a lot, which is like really good or amazing or of high quality or standard. So I mean, that is a good one to know because it is coming up so frequently. But again, it really does come down to your individual level and where you see it, where you think you need the most help. If you're seeing yourself consistently not doing well on words and context, then I would say the next appropriate step would be going in and looking on Quizlet or using the Kabir website or whatever website you are finding these keywords in. And if you aren't necessarily finding good study resources for that, what I'd instead do is after when you're reviewing your test, your practice test, I would go through, highlight words note down words that you didn't necessarily know and look for definitions for them. Because just again, having that list can be really consistent for you and it's really personalized again. And then you can also put those into a Quizlet as well if needed. So that can be a really helpful strategy as well.
Oh, okay, thank you. That was very helpful. And then, so one last question is that, did you analyze your previous PSAT scores to help with studying for the SAT? And if you did, was it helpful, or should people also study for the PSAT?
Yeah, so when you're looking at those PSAT or PSAT 8-9 or PSAT 10 results, they will actually give you a decent indication of where you are on like the actual when you're going for your SAT score. Um, sorry, what College Board does in between the PSAT 8-9, the PSAT 10/PSAT, and then the SAT is they'll add 80 points to each one. So PSAT 8-9 is 1440 out of 1440. PSAT 10 and PSAT are at 1520, and then the SAT are at a 1600. So really you need to look at it with that scale. So if you got like a 1440 on the PSAT 8-9, that's not an indication that you'll get a 1440. You'll most likely score higher than that because you're just scoring so well in the PSAT 8-9. However, while the score reports are helpful and give you a good indication, at a certain point, they don't necessarily become as useful because what College Board will give you with those score reports is they'll give you bars with your proficiency in different task domains, as they like to call them. So information and ideas is one of those domains, let's say. And it'll give you a score range 0 to 800. However, those score ranges are between 100 are within 100 points. So it'll give you your range as maybe a 600 to 690. You could be anywhere in that range. And if you're between like a 700 and an 800 for that range, but you're still not scoring as high as you want to, it doesn't tell you where you're losing points. So it can be useful, but again, I do really recommend using those Blue Book practice tests because they actually give you detailed results and something that you can actually look at instead of just those simple bars, which don't really give you much understanding of what you're actually getting wrong on those tests. So they can be useful and good indicators, but I wouldn't recommend them as your sole basis for where to start. Again, I'd recommend starting with one of those Blue Book practice tests. Oh, and also studying for the PSAT. Sorry, I forgot to answer that second part. I do recommend studying for the PSAT, but not necessarily the PSAT 8/9 or the PSAT 10. And so what the difference between those are the PSAT 8-9 and the PSAT 10 don't actually really do anything. Colleges and scholarship organizations can use them, but it's very atypical. Whereas the PSAT and the SAT are what they'll actually take. And in terms of the PSAT, I really do recommend studying for that one because that can get you what's called national merit. And so what national merit is it's a scholarship program where they'll give different awards based on the scores you get. So I believe they also calculate a index score with the score that you actually got on the PSAT. And sorry, just slipping my mind how they calculate it, but I believe it's something like doubling your reading and writing score plus your math score divided by some number, and it gets you that score. And basically, if your index score is high enough, you'll be a national merit scholar, commended. And what that means is there. Your school's just celebrating you, or the international, or sorry, not internationally. In the state, you scored highly enough to be commended, or you scored in a certain percentile to be recognized, and that's really good because it's an award you can put down for colleges. If you score even higher than that, you can be a PSAT national merit semifinalist. And what this will mean is you're actually in the competition to win a national merit scholarship. So then you'll go through an application process to become a national merit finalist. And from there, you have a chance to win an actual scholarship. And the higher you get in this process, it looks really good on your college apps. So I do highly recommend studying for that. I know that can be difficult because a lot of the times you'll take that in the fall of your junior year, but really do study that. That's why I also do recommend you study in your summer of your sophomore year, because you'll study, take the SAT in August, and then you'll again have the PSAT coming up soon in September, October. So again, it's really just coinciding those times so you can maximize your score on both those tests, because those are the two that really actually do matter.
Perfect. Speaking of maximizing your score, is it important is focusing on one section of the SAT important for score maximization? More specifically, is it better to super score and focus on one section at a time? And they also asked how many like times specifically should you take the SAT?
Okay. So for that first part of that question, is it better to focus on one section? Um, I think it is better to focus on one section if you're severely like underperforming on one section compared to the other. So say you had like a 750 math subscore, and you have like a six or like a 550 on your reading and writing section. Obviously, that's a huge discrepancy right there. And I would highly prioritize working on that reading and writing score first, because those are where you're going to be able to make the most improvement in less time. Because when you start getting up to higher scores in your score range, it's harder to go up from there, because they're just smaller things and they're looking for more and more perfection or less small mistakes, which are harder to catch. So starting from the lower score that you're struggling on the most is going to be really crucial in that. And in terms of going back to super scoring again, so again, super scoring will come down to whatever college you want to go to. But if your dream school, your target school, or whatever school you actually hope to go to, just take super scoring like U of M, then I would focus on super scoring if that is something that you think you'll need to do to achieve the score. But I typically don't see that with students who are succeeding in one section but doing poorly in another, because they'll typically consistently succeed in one section and then underperform consistently in one section. So you kind of want to bring those back where you can find a healthy balance and get good scores together. But if you are very inconsistent about it, then it is a good idea to study both and focus on both sections. And then, I'm sorry, what was your second part of the question? I forgot.
How many times do you suggest taking the SAT?
Okay, yeah. So I think it does come down to you again, because it's really your goal score, and it's really what you are looking to score on the SAT. So say you took it twice and you got a 1580 on your second try, then that's fantastic for you. You'll most likely be happy with that score and you'll want to keep it. Whereas maybe you took it like four times and your score is 1300 on that fourth attempt. If that's not your goal score, there's no shame in trying to take it again. I would say take it as many times as you need and as you can afford to actually reach your goal score. But I wouldn't say take it consistently month to month, back to back to back, because that just doesn't give you enough time to study and improve. So again, as I was saying earlier, try to leave at least like a 1 month where you can just focus on studying, because you don't want to like overwhelm yourself and just keep on doing SATs over and over. Find a healthy balance that works for you and that lets you achieve your goal score.
There is another question in the chat. It says that, are you able to choose the highest score out of all your tries to submit, or is it just submits the latest score? So I think that's just answers like this. That's what super score means, right? Like choosing the highest score.
So this is actually an interesting question because some colleges have weird. It really, again, it depends on the college. So some colleges want to see every score. So this is not that's not necessarily super scoring. They'll literally take all your scores. So every score starting from every SAT you've taken. So say you took it 4 times, they'll see all 4 scores. A super score is where you submit your highest subsection score of each time. So say you scored a 780 on reading on one time and then scored a 720 on that same test for math. Whereas on your other attempt, you scored a 720 in reading, but a 780 on math. Some colleges will allow you to submit both 780s together for a combined score of a 1560. So that's what super scoring is. Again, for the original person who asked the question, it does depend again on the college. I believe it is Georgetown or a similar university, one of a higher up university does take all of the scores, but it is really uncommon. They're the only school that I've really heard of taking every score. So most of the time it is to your benefit to try to get your highest score possible. But colleges that are typically looking at every score, they're not necessarily looking to like judge you for your first score. They're more so looking to see if you're making improvement over that time. So it's not really about like, oh, I took it once and got a 800, but the second time I got a 1600. Colleges that are taking all scores would be really impressed by that because they'll be like, wow, this person made such a significant increase because they were able to study and put in some hard work. So that shows a kind of character that we want at the college. So even if you have to submit all your scores and you're not necessarily proud of one of them, it's okay. They just want to see that you're growing and improving.
Okay, thank you so much for answering all the questions. And that will conclude our Q&A session and our presentation for our speaker. So thank you so much, Sid, for being our speaker for today's seminar. And we found your presentation very helpful and inspiring, and we hope that everyone in the audience learned from it.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this seminar. If you have any other questions, Sid will be posting I will post Sid's email in the chat, and you can email him, and we will also be posting our MYU YLC email in the chat, so you can email there as well. I know we might not have answered everyone's question, but feel free to contact, those information. So I will go ahead and post all of the emails in the chat really quickly. Oh, yep, Sid has already posted in the chat his email, so you can contact there. And I will post the YLC email, and if you have any questions for that, then you can email there as well. Okay, there are those two emails. So we'll give you some time to copy it down. All right, thank you everyone, and we hope you enjoyed it. And that concludes the seminar. Thank you, Sid.
Okay, thank you guys. You guys are free to leave.